I mean, the overall intent of the way that this version of the code is proposed is to allow the water-dependent use as long as any adverse impacts are avoided, mitigated.
Right.
So it's the way it's
A way
teased
of
out here.
prohibiting net pens without being straightforward.
Just trying to clarify 8 versus 9.
And
So
which
as
page are you on?
What's that?
What page are you on?
Oh, bottom of page 11,
Okay.
which is Roman
So
numeral
Roman,
8.
okay, there, thank you.
So as I understand it, the setbacks that we're talking about are just critical or feeding or migration areas for birds and mammals. So that would not include for fish.
Not in number 9, but
Right.
elsewhere there's reference to lists of habitat for migrating salmon
Okay.
and forage fish.
Okay, and I see 9 on the next page talks about shading and adverse impacts of existing red-brown algae and eelgrass beds. Okay, so I just wanted to make sure that it was intentional, that we were just talking about birds and mammals in
Mhm.
8. Okay,
Yeah, addressed separately in these different provisions.
okay, great, thank you. Sorry, Commissioner.
So one other thing I would like to see included in number 13 in the list, maybe after parasites, would be viruses.
There's a Roman number 13 on
On
page,
page 9 of 31.
oh, page 9. And I'm sorry, say that again if you could, Commissioner?
Page 9 of 31,
Right.
number 13.
After
it
parasites?
says, yeah, finfish, aquaculture, including net pens, it uses or releases, it has a list of things, and I would like to include viruses in that list. I think, and that's been one of my real concerns. It does go into these areas. As we've gotten even more input on finfish farming, one of the major concerns that's in the record is about the viruses that have started evolving in these kind of enclosed, concentrated net pen areas, that have led to real disastrous results in Chile and other places, and can have a real severe impact on our native salmon. And that can also hold true for, I think, any other finfish. So I think, that becomes one of my concerns as I look at this, and as I looked at the literature and really didn't see anything from the industry that spoke to that. As you look through, they speak a lot to what they can do about parasites and what they can do about bacterial contamination, what they can do, with antibiotics and those sort of things. And of course, each one of those has their side effects or complications as you try to deal with the problem. But they didn't have anything about viruses. And viruses are a conundrum on land. We see that all the time. You see swine flu, avian flu, that kind of thing start spreading. It's difficult to treat. And a lot of times what you do is, you isolate. Well, that's not what we're doing here. We're concentrating the fish in these environments. Just the opposite of what you would want to do if you wanted to keep the virus separate. It's really an incubator for viruses and for creating new viruses. So, I have a real problem with that. When you mention the upland finfish farming, I see a lot more potential for controlling that with upland finfish farming. It's something where the water can be treated. For example, discharged water could be heated to a degree where a virus would be destroyed. That's one of the things the body does, kill a virus, is to get a fever, okay? So there's ways to manage upland viruses that are caused, that are starting to create in a certain area. And of course, no industry wants to create a virus that starts injuring its product. They would probably do that on their own and say, wait, let's treat this water and start over, you know. And they'd be able to do that in that isolated way, but it wouldn't be contaminating everything else. So I really think it's important to add that in there for that reason. One of my several concerns, actually, as I look through this, I was looking at the mill site, like you were pointing out earlier, and you know, we are talking, when we start talking about the net pens, about industrial agriculture, really, or industrial aquaculture. And in that way, it does tend to fit with a mill site, because you've got industry there. That's what you would expect, is to see industry around the mill site. What you don't necessarily expect is to start citing industry in residential areas. But you might expect to see it in resource lands. You know, we have mines, we have logging, we have industry that happens out in our resource lands on land. So you might expect to see industrial agriculture in that kind of situation. As I look, and you can look on our map back there, our zoning map, if you look around the shoreline in Jefferson County, you'll see that virtually all of it around the Quimper Peninsula is zoned residential. And as you go on down, you really don't see it not being residential until you start getting down on the Thorndike Peninsula and Nabob and other places that are down in Hood Canal, where we've got significant other problems that eliminate the desirability of, you know, having, you know, farm fishing out in the water. So really, you know, even the other industrial sites, maybe Matt's it's got a little piece there, but the other high-intensity uses that we've identified here are in residential areas. They're where marinas are. And marinas are places usually where kind of the water slows or it's protected somehow, and so that doesn't even probably have the flow that you want for a net pen to discharge everything. So yeah, I really have a problem with putting an industrial use next to residences. I think we've heard a lot of people express concern about property values. I think this could have a greater property value effect and negative effect than anything else in this program, frankly. If you put one out in front of your house, you know, to put net pens out there if you're on the water. So that's a concern about that incompatibility. I almost wonder if, you know, by our zoning in the past, and we found this problem before, by not envisioning, oh, someday we might want to have an area for industry along the shoreline. You know, we've zoned it all residential now. It has to have a comp plan amendment to go back. So there really hasn't been that vision in the past of saying, let's set aside places for this. And so now we've set aside all these places for residential. It's not really compatible with this out in the water. I don't think looking at the shoreline in that way and looking at zoning on the water for industry was looked at the same time we looked at zoning on the land very well. And that's just what we've inherited, but I kind of see it as already excluded, frankly. It's not a matter of we're doing it, it just doesn't fit now. Except maybe in this area around the mill, which has its own problems. If you move it out far enough to get past the eelgrass beds, and where it won't affect the salmon going up Chimicum Creek, and you're pretty well, you know, you're looking at Indian Island on the other side, you're looking at navigation paths. I wonder if there really is a place left there. Because these pathways are pretty narrow around in the interior part of Jefferson County. It's not like the ocean where we have endless, or seemingly endless, expanse before you get to Japan. You know, it's pretty narrow. You know, most places you're standing there, you see across to the other side quite easily.